Got it.
Excellent. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you. We are introducing Aliza Aziz today. Thank you, Aliza, for joining us. Aliza is a licensed social worker in Israel who has spent her life working on improving communication skills and relationships between people. In addition to the communication skill workshop she's developed, she has worked in elder care, domestic violence prevention, and with youth, in senior centers and senior living centers, and she helps nourish individual and communal relationships between the seniors, their families, and staff members. In domestic violence prevention, she helps motivated couples adjust their communication patterns to help keep their relationships and families intact. With young people, she helps them avoid the pitfalls that might land them in marriage counseling later in life. Aliza received her MSW degree from Wurzweiler School of Social Work, Yeshiva University, and her BA from Barnard College, Columbia University. She has been happily married, as has her husband, for over 30 years, and has raised 4 reasonably well-adjusted children who pass along to their friends the communication skills their parents modeled. Aliza's workshops are available for individuals, couples, groups, and includes private counseling sessions if desired. Thank you so much, Aliza. We are looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome.
It is an absolute honor. Naomi, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for inviting me. I was so impressed with your morning program. Great way to start the day. And Batya, you will see, Batya is the person who gave the little Dvar Torah. You will see how well my talk this morning flows right into what you spoke about. So a little over a week ago, we finished counting the Omer, and we celebrated Shavuot, the giving of the Torah. And in the Torah, we have 613 mitzvot, one of which is the Tzedek Tishpot Amitecha from Kedushim, which we read a couple weeks ago. With righteousness shall you judge your fellow. More commonly, we refer to Dan Lechaf Zchut, which comes from Pirkei Avot. And colloquially, we try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Intellectually, we all know that we need to do that. It's the right thing to do. It's what Torah tells us to do. But what happens in the moment? What happens when we see one child pushing another child? What happens when you have something important to share with your spouse, you call your spouse, you know they're available, and they're not answering? What happens when, fill in the blank, the doctor's office, the lawyer's office, the insurance adjuster, they're not calling you back, you're waiting and waiting? And what happens when someone you call a friend makes a sourpuss face when you walk in the door? What happens? Well, you yell at the child for pushing the other child. You're angry at your spouse for avoiding you, for not answering your call. You yell at the poor clerk on the line of the doctor's office or insurance office because you know that they're trying to make your life miserable. And that person who you think is your friend, you're sure that they're angry at you because you saw it on their face. You may be right. You may be right. But you also might be wrong. What if that child pushed another child out of the way because there was a bee buzzing around his head? Your spouse was in the midst of a heart-to-heart with your child. The office that you've been waiting to hear from, they're waiting to get more information so they can help you. And that friend that made that sourpuss face, he banged his elbow the moment you walked in the room. Made that sourpuss face. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you for letting me do this so I can also start my slideshow. Because today I'm going to present a few techniques that we can use so that we can judge others favorably. The problem is we can learn those techniques, but if we don't practice them, if we don't apply them all the time, every day, we're not going to use them. The way we communicate is our emotional self-defense. And just as someone who learns self-defense, taekwondo, Krav Maga, judo, or even someone who learns ballet or piano or tennis, they practice and practice and practice those skills until they become automatic, second nature. We want to get to the point where we can apply these things as a second nature. All right. Someone throws a punch at someone who studies martial arts without thinking they know how to block, or without thinking they know how to use that person's momentum to defend themselves. Okay, someone who studies ballet, fifth position, shoulders down, stomach in, head up, arms high. Piano, hands on the keys, fingers curved. Take that tennis racket, whatever it is, they practice, they have it, becomes second nature. So we want these skills to become second nature. And it doesn't matter how old we are, how set in our ways we are. We can change our behaviors. We just have to practice. Okay, now, the most important technique with which the others won't work is breathing. That slow meditation breath, yoga breath, Pilates breath, in from your nose, out from your mouth. And with each out breath, relax your muscles. It sounds simplistic, but we do this when we give birth, labor. Those of us who learned that the pre-birth classes, in from your nose, out from your mouth. How can this help us? Because the moment we find ourselves under stress, the moment we see something that aggravates us, we see an old person walk on a bus and we see a young person sitting in the disabled seat and not get up, we immediately get a visceral reaction. Okay, and what we're going to look at that young person and say, you know, why aren't you getting up? Getting ahead of myself. The visceral reaction that we get, that's our amygdala, the part of our brain that deals with immediate stress situations. This is great when we have a life-threatening situation. Our heart beats faster, our breathing speeds up, our blood pressure rises, our heart beats faster. We could run if we have to. But most of the time, when that reaction happens physiologically, it's not a life-threatening situation. We need to allow our neocortex, the part of our brain that manages logic and reason, we need our neocortex to take over. The way to do that is to breathe. Take those slow, deep breaths. Pay attention to your own body's symptoms of anxiety, whether it's your stomach or your neck or your hands or your eyes, your forehead. Pay attention. When you feel that, that is your body's way of saying, I'm getting into stress mode. And anything after that, you're not going to reply well. It's going to end up in a negative, it may end up in a negative interaction with someone because you're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Take a few breaths. Now, how do we really practice this? How can we do that? So I submit that every day, before every day, you choose an activity that you do every day. Something simple, like getting in the car. You sit in your car.
Can we see you to speak? Because I want to see your face, if you don't mind.
I've activated my camera.
You just have to tap on the face and you'll get her in larger, Charlene.
Yeah, no, I can't.
Tap on her, you'll get it, that'll become larger than the print. Try it.
I'm sorry, my camera is activated.
No, she can be
We
seen.
see you.
If anybody can write it in the chat so as not to disturb the, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So I ask everyone to find some activity that you do every day, like get in your car, or if you drive a lot, a red light. And that becomes your cue to stop and take 3 slow, deep breaths. Count to 4 while you breathe in from your nose, and 4 as you breathe out. And with each breath out, you relax your muscles. Breathe in and breathe out. Relax. See how quickly you can get into a relaxed mode in those 3 breaths. Or perhaps if you stand and wash a lot of dishes, when you're washing dishes, take a few breaths. If you live in a building with an elevator, when you're riding in the elevator. If there are stairs in your house or in your building, when you're on the landing of the step, that's your cue. Take those breaths. You will find that it will slow your heart rate. If you're walking up those stairs, this is also a good technique for getting you to your destination. It slows your heart breath, slows your breathing, oxygenates your body, your mind. Now, if we do that every day, we get used to doing that. We become habituated to taking those breaths. The next time you get into a fight with someone and you're going to yell at your kids, or you're angry about something, you're frustrated, you're angry, you will know that those breaths will come, even if you're in the middle of an outburst. It will come. So practice those breaths. Make them a part of your life so that you can give yourself room to judge others favorably. Slow down and breathe. Now, I would like to invite you all into my clinic. Please join my clinic. This is an exercise that I do with my clients. Imagine that I am sitting in that chair looking at you. And you're looking at me, I'm looking at you. And I ask you to tell me how you would describe the room in which we're sitting. Well, you would say, because we have a lot of people here, I can't ask each of you, but you'd say, well, it looks like there's a bookcase behind you and there's something covering part of the bookcase. There may be a desk there, there's a little trash pail. And I would say to you, are you crazy? You have no idea what you're talking about. There's no bookcase in this room. There's no desk. There's no trash bag. There's a sofa where you're sitting. There's a window. There's a door. There's some flowers. And we could get into a huge argument about it. But actually, right? We each have our own perspective. And there's your perspective, which is right. And there's my perspective, which is also right. And there's also the bigger picture. There's what's above us and what's below us and what's to this side and what's to that side. Now, this is a very simplistic example, but that goes for every conversation we have, every interaction that we have between people. So I use that example, that old elderly person comes up on the bus and there's a young person sitting in the disabled section. I'm sitting a seat or two behind the young person, and I start to get very angry. Why isn't that young person getting up? If I don't say anything to that young person, I'm going to be walking out saying, oh my gosh, that young person, he has a mohawk and all those young people, and ear piercings, and they have no idea. They're such, what a horrible kid. Or it's a religious kid. Why didn't they get up? What a Chilul Hashem. The person sitting across from that young person in the disabled seat has a different perspective. They see the cast that's on that young person's leg. And even if there's no cast, maybe that young person has a heart problem. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's a bigger picture. There is always another perspective, many perspectives. And usually they're both right. And they're always right for the person whose perspective it is. Giving room to the other person to have their perspective allows you to be less judgmental. I suggest, again, you don't want to, if you start arguing, that other person gets into the fight, flight, freeze mode. You get into that fight, flight, freeze mode. If you give in to that immediate sensation. But if you think, wait a second, take those breaths, take those breaths. If you don't take those breaths, you won't give yourself space to have those thoughts of maybe there's another story. So take those breaths and then you think, okay, maybe there's another story here. Maybe I should walk around to the other side. Even when you're having a discussion one-on-one with a person, you could say, you know what? I can see from your perspective where you're coming from. I may not agree with you, but I can see your point. What will that do in continuing the conversation? Get used to practice saying something that you're comfortable with. You don't have to use my words. Make up something for yourself. You know, I hear your point. I see from your perspective. You know, someone could say to me, Aliza, every time I walk in the door, you make a sour face. And I could argue with them. Well, when you come in the door, you just kick your shoes off and make a mess. I could do that. But I could also say, when they say that, I could say, you know, you're right. I do make a face when you walk through the door. You're absolutely right. Do you have any idea why I make that face? And it changes the whole process of the conversation or the argument that it might have turned into. Acknowledge the other perspective. Take that breath and acknowledge the other perspective. That will help you judge others favorably. And practice saying that. In our interactions with people, so much has to do with misunderstanding. We misunderstand things all the time. Now, we don't realize it, but there are no less than 3 stages where we understand in any simple one-to-one statement, okay, between 2 people. I'm here right now talking to you. I have something in my mind, in my head that I want to say. Am I actually saying what I really mean? Okay, I'll take care of that later. I'll take care of it later. And you here, you don't know what I mean when I say I'll take care of it later. It could be at 5 minutes. Could it be an hour? Could it be tomorrow? Could I be saying, I'm just saying this because I want you to leave me alone and I have no intention of taking care of this at all. Okay, what I'm thinking versus what I'm saying may be very different. Okay, then I say something and we all remember, I'm sure, the game of telephone that we played as children. You have a whole group of people in a circle and I whisper into somebody's ear and it goes around the group and comes back to me completely different from what I said at the beginning. Clearly, the person next to me or the person next to him didn't hear what was said to him. There's an expectation. Maybe they said this, so they assume. It is possible that what you are hearing is not what was said. And so your whole concept of how you're interpreting, you're judging this person for what they said, maybe it wasn't what they said. And then the final thing is from what they said to what you understand. So let's go back to that I'll take care of it later. There was a big argument in the place that I worked because someone said they'd take care of it later, and they thought they meant in an hour when it was something that needed to be taken care of immediately. And the later for that person was 5 minutes. So when we're having verbal conversation and we're thinking, again, if you don't breathe, you won't know to do this. But turn back and ask for clarification. Because, forget the other thing, in terms of in conversation, in misunderstandings, we also have the effects of body language and facial expressions. Okay, we don't know if this lovely woman is angry or if that's just her face. It happens, we misread things. It happens all the time. I will tell you of a story of at a Sukkot table. We were outside and I was walking outside with some things for the table and I banged my toe when I walked out the door. That was all, and brought stuff to the table and went inside. My husband was at the table with our guests and we had a bottle of very, very fine whiskey that's sitting there. There was only a little bit left. And our guest had reached out his hand to take some whiskey, and then he let go of the bottle. And my husband said, "Why aren't you taking some more whiskey? Please be my guest." "Oh, no, your wife doesn't want me to finish the bottle." And my husband said, "That can't be. It can't be. Why would you think that?" "Oh, I saw the face she made when I put my hand on the bottle." So he came to me, he said, "What is he talking about?" I had no idea what he was talking about until I remembered that I banged my foot on my way out the door. So in experiencing things, we may have misunderstood. Take a breath. Give yourself benefit of the doubt in addition to the other, and think, did they really mean what they said? Did I hear correctly what they said? Did I correctly understand what I heard? Am I correctly understanding their body language and their facial expressions? And vice versa, because people are looking at us and judging us. I pray to Hashem every day when I have to give these presentations that I am saying what I need to say. And then ask for clarification. If it causes a negative feeling in you, if it causes you to have that amygdala response, fight, flight, freeze, because you ask for clarification, take the breath and ask for clarification. So now, I would like to introduce you to something. I am very proud of this. Years ago, I studied something in university. It's a model that was created by Alfred Adler on behavior. And I found it fascinating, but then I forgot about it. I could never remember it. I moved to Israel, made Aliyah to Israel, and I discovered that in Israel, they consolidated it and put it into a wonderful acronym that now I can remember. And that acronym is Efrat. And I do these programs in Hebrew as well, which is why I have Hebrew and English on my screen. I took Efrat and I moved it back into English in a way that makes it easier for me and hopefully others to remember. So EVER is an acronym for event, version, emotion. So event is not just, yes, an event is a bar mitzvah and a wedding and whatnot, but an event is any particular moment in time. The event is that elder person walking onto the bus and you seeing that young person not moving. An event is the sentence your husband said when he came into the house. And what we do when the very first thing, this happens in a split second, when we have an event, We tell ourselves a story of that event. We tell ourselves a version. So the event is the stimulus, is a trigger. And the version is the interpretation of that stimulus. We tell ourselves a story, what they really mean or what we think they really mean. And that story, that interpretation, that version causes an emotion. And if it's a negative version, it will cause a negative emotion. It will cause us to go into that fight, flight, freeze mode, our amygdala to take over, which then causes us to respond in a way that is often a negative response. It is often one that does not further positive interactions. So we want to change the way we look at events. We're going to look at take certain, I'm going to give you some examples, all right? But I want you can use everything. This is something to practice this. You can use any event that happens in your life, okay? You see a car cut you off on the road. Maybe there's an emergency. Maybe somebody's in the car is having an accident, is having a problem. Just practice pretending that, saying to yourself, maybe this is not a negative thing. Maybe there's a positive reason that this is happening. So we use other people's events. We can use conversations that we have. People say something to you. I'm going to tell you something very innocuous. Very, very innocuous. Balloon. Everybody loves balloons. Balloons make you smile. Okay, right? Unless you had a trauma with a balloon. God forbid somebody choked by it, or you had that kind of an event, or there was something, or as a child, you were bombarded with balloons. If you had a traumatic experience with a balloon, just my mentioning balloons is going to cause you to have this negative interpretation and a negative emotion and a response that will be negative. I had an event, I was in a synagogue kiddush once, and my child came over and said something, and I snapped at him. And I realized, oh my God, why did I snap at him? And knowing that something, all of a sudden I had become in this stress mode. And I looked around and I saw that in the room had come a person that I was having an argument with. Now the event was that person walking in the room. It wasn't even conscious. It was a subconscious event, which caused me to have that reaction and then snap at my child. So we can pay attention to our reactions. Something just happened. Some event triggered me. What was that event? We can use everything that happens in our lives. We can practice, because if we practice, we'll be able to do this when we really need it in order to judge others favorably. Okay, and in conversations, okay, that person said something to me. That's my event. My response to them is their event, and it becomes a verbal ping pong. Every conversation is a verbal ping pong. And I want to get better at knowing how to more gently. I want an easy game of ping pong. I don't want a horrible. I don't want to have a really, serious game of ping pong. I want a gentle game of ping pong in my life. I have to learn how to volley in a positive way, in a gentle way. This is what we're going to learn to do. So I can't ask you all to tell me what your initial experience is of this event, but I'm going to go through this quickly. I see we're getting short on time. So I will share. Most people see that picture and they think, oh, this poor little boy who wants his attention from his mother. But we can look at this picture a different way. He could be saying, Mommy, I want to hold my baby sister too. Or he could be saying, Mommy, there's a telephone call. Or he could be saying, Mommy, the kitchen's on fire. We don't, God forbid, we don't know what that is. But in our initial reaction, we could be thinking, oh my gosh, that poor child. Okay, here's another. Most people look at this and think, oh, that's the caregiver. No, that's my father, Zichron Livracha, and a dear friend of mine who they became friends. And they went to go out to lunch once a week. He called her his other daughter. And one day, a woman, they were interacting as a parent, as a father and a child, as adult child. And a person at the restaurant came over and started reprimanding who she thought was the caregiver. How dare you speak to your client like that? And my father turned and said, that's my daughter. And of course, she was shocked. Had she been able to do this, breathe and rethink it, she might have approached them still out of concern, because if it is a caregiver, that would have been something out of concern. She could have come over and said, you two seem to have a very interesting relationship. Tell me what your relationship is. You seem to have, it's very interesting. It would have brought a completely different response. I had a very interesting example with someone else. Most people look at this and think, oh, the boy's stealing the candy. Maybe the boy's little brother stole the candy and he's returning it. I had a client who had grown up in a candy store and said that the boy works there and the man is stealing something. So much depends on what is our own experience. That's how we tell that version of whatever that story is. And lastly is this poor child who's made to stand there and wash the dishes. Poor child. You know what? Her mom just had a baby and she's trying to help her mother. Or there was a big Shabbos and she's trying to help her parents. Okay, we can use the things around us. We can use movies, television, stories, even stories from the Torah and books. We can use those events as practice. What should they have done? What are some options, what they could have? Why did they assume X? What else could they have assumed? All right, in this week's Parsha, Bahalatcha, okay, was the story of Aaron and Miriam. In Israel, we already read the Parsha. You guys are reading, outside of Israel, you're reading the Parsha this week. So the story of Aaron and Miriam, who spoke Lashon Hara on Miriam. What would have happened if they had taken those breaths, thought about it, and said, you know what? Maybe we don't see the whole picture. Maybe there's something we don't see. Then they wouldn't have gotten punished. Miriam wouldn't have gotten punished. And in Israel, the parsha that we're reading now is Shalach Lecha. If the spies had thought, if they had done their breathing and thought, maybe what we're seeing isn't the whole picture, they would have had a doubt on their doubt. They doubted that they could, that the Bnei Israel could come into Eretz Israel and conquer the giants. They doubted that. All you need is a doubt. If they had doubted that, they would have come back and they might have said, you know, there's giants there and it might be hard, but if Hashem is with us, we can do it. Or they could have said something else. If you have a doubt, even a little bit of doubt that your interpretation is wrong, that your perception is wrong, that you misunderstand what's going on, changes everything. And you can now give the benefit of the doubt. So the techniques we've learned, slow down and breathe. If you do this regularly, you will slow down your response. Perspective, practice recognizing, be cognizant that there's always another perspective and that from the other perspective, maybe there's validity. You never know, there might be, try it. And with misunderstanding, ask for clarification. Ask for clarification. I jumped ahead of myself here. And forever, be aware. Be aware that there is this thing that happens, this event, and we interpret it. Use the perspective, recognizing that there's other perspectives. Use clarification and use your breathing. This will give you them and you a chance. So thank you. I hope you've understood. And if there's any questions, and I forgot to bring what Batya said about warming the heart helps develop the spirituality. When we breathe, we give ourselves that opportunity to warm our hearts. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Aliza. That was so insightful, and you're really giving us tools to like function and judge favorably. Do you have time for a couple of questions? We usually finish at 9.
Absolutely.
Okay, so maybe just 1 or 2 questions if anybody has.
I'm sorry, I didn't check the chats. I see that now. Thank you. Any questions?
I guess you were so clear, Aliza, with what your points were, that they spoke for themselves. You spope for yourself.
Hi in Rosenberg. Hi in Rosenberg. Thank you. Practice ayin tova. That's exactly what it is.
I do have a question, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So one thing that I find can be a pitfall is that when we're trying to be done the katzchus for one person, we can almost shift the blame to somebody else, which isn't being done the katzchus them, right? So meaning, oh, I saw that this thing had happened. Well, then sometimes our minds can go, well, then maybe there was a reason that that person reacted that way. So how do we avoid really completely eliminating any blame on anyone versus just shifting it to someone else?
Because the other person isn't doing their breathing. The other person is having, and that's okay. They haven't learned it. They haven't practiced it. And I think we all do those things. And you'll find too, that as you do them, the people around you will also do them. And part of it is natural. And if you do end up shifting the blame to someone else, you then look at them and say, well, maybe there's something there also that I don't see. Just keep moving it along, move it forward.
Thank you.
Someone had asked if I could break down the ever events, but I did. I hope I did that. Ever is events, V is version. Oh, somebody wrote that in too, I see.
I just want to clarify, please, if you don't mind, this is Chaya Rosenberg. First, I want to thank Cyril Mitzman at this point for inviting me to this beautiful, amazing platform, and that things like this that are so amazing, life-changing. They're really life-giving. Also, the breathing is good for the nervous system and for the whole health of the body and to relieve stress. So you're really saving lives with this information. So thank you for that.
I forgot to mention about lowering blood pressure. Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned it briefly. But breathing like that can lower your blood pressure by about 10 points by breathing like that. When you go in, it lowers your blood pressure.
Right. Thank you. My question is that, so are you saying that if a person will practice the breathing throughout the day, that when things like that happen, they'll naturally breathe? Or how do we trigger the breathing when there is an event that we're trying to judge favorably?
Okay. So at the beginning, I did a little role play. When you become habituated, if you breathe every day when you don't need it, and you're aware that I can use this, when you do the breathing, you keep it in mind, I can use this when I need it. Even if you're in the middle of having that argument with the person, or you're starting to be angry, that boy on the bus, why isn't he moving for her? That breathing will come because it's now part of who you are. And you'll breathe, and your heart will slow down a little bit, and you'll say, maybe I'm not seeing the full picture. So it's a skill to, there's other skills to slow down. I have a whole thing on communicating. And this is the first skill on that one too, because when our amygdala is in action, we make all kinds of mistakes in our communicating, in our interactions, and this is the very first and most important. People do it when they do yoga, they do it when they meditate, but they don't think to use it every day. And if you're standing at your kitchen sink, breathing, and then your kid comes in and starts driving you crazy, it'll be there. And even if you're in the middle of yelling at your kid and you stop and take those breaths, you are demonstrating to your kid, your child, you're demonstrating self-control, which is an amazing thing to teach them. Oh, I forgot to share one thing. I taught my kids also how to do the breathing, and I did it in a very fun way by going, breathe in from your nose and out from your mouth. In from your nose, out from your mouth. And they grew up knowing that the breathing is there for them. And I see them using it too. And when they see you modeling it, they will learn it also. Think about a world we live in where everybody, as soon as they get angry, takes a deep breath. And there's even somebody who says, I can't do that. I can't do that. There's even a small little hack. Practice, just breathe in from your nose, one deep breath as you're speaking, before you say anything. Because we always have to intake breath when we want to talk. And if we get into the habit of breathing in from our nose, by necessity, it's a slower breath, and it gives ourselves that split second of time to think a little bit about how we're going to actually speak. Oftentimes it's not what we say, but how we say it. Kids, I was about to scream, but I'm not going to scream, but I'm angry. So people who, I've worked with people who they can't do that. I said, can you just start breathing in from your nose when you want to talk? I'm like, okay, I can try that. Oh, you know what? It helped.
Excellent. Thank you, Aliza. This was fantastic. Really, really wonderful tips and points that Nishmat will all be able to incorporate into our lives. So I just want to be sensitive to our